The pads are installed. There's the clip and the 3-fingered shim plate. There's 1, 2, and then the center finger. That goes on the non-piston side of the caliper. And I went back and looked at the diagram, and that's the way they show it. So unless you're really paying attention, that's probably something a lot of people miss. So it's time to put the piston part back on, and tomorrow I'll be able to torque those bolts correctly, the 4 of them, those 2 there, and then the main ones, and then I'll do the driver's side. I have to use my torque wrench to bolt down the main part of the caliper to the hub, and it looks like they're recommending 79 foot-pounds. This is my torque wrench that I'm going to go ahead and use, and it reads foot-pounds. So now when you're pushing 80 foot-pounds of torque, notice that I have the hub going straight. I have the wheel assembly going straight instead of at a turn. So if you can torque down the bolts with the hub assembly straight instead of at a turn, it's probably a good idea, because when it's on a turn and you're pushing that much torque, just less stress on the system. It probably wouldn't hurt it, but it's just a good idea to put as little stress on parts as you can. So okay, so I just did the main caliper bolts at 79 foot-pounds, or around there. So the next one is the piston bolts, caliper piston housing, and those are 25 foot-pounds. So I've had the brakes repaired for almost a month now. You can see that I put it back together, of course. And this is the driver's side, and this is the passenger side. So the original reason why I replaced the brakes, the brake pads, is because I was getting some brake drag on the passenger side wheel. I'd go to touch this area here, the lug nuts and the hub, and there'd be times that it would be so hot that I could hardly hold my hand against it. So obviously there's friction there that shouldn't be there. And I'd go to do the same thing on the driver's side, and of course it would only be warm instead of boiling hot. So to make a long story short, the problem still exists even after putting in new pads and greasing up the slide pins. So I have a system that is not anti-lock brakes. So there's no anti-lock brakes on this car. And that valve, that T joint, it comes directly. So there's the main out, one of the main outs from the master cylinder, and you can see that the pipe curves and goes right into that valve. So that line right there goes over here. There's up right there. Where'd it go? and goes directly out. So it's the only brake on the car where it goes directly from the master cylinder to the caliper. The other three, the driver's side and the two rear brakes, go through the proportional valve, which is right it's kind of hard to see, but the proportional valve is right there. So the T, you can see it right there, that goes, the two red marks, the one in the middle goes to the passenger caliper, and then the lower one, that goes into the proportional valve. So it's very interesting that the brake caliper that I'm having trouble with is the only one in the whole system that is fed directly from the master cylinder. The pressure that goes to that one does not go through the proportional valve, and that's the one that's locking up on me intermittently. It's not a continuous problem. It just comes and goes and varies in degrees of how much brake drag I have. I'm gonna have to figure out where to go next on this brake issue that I'm having. So the fact that it's still having the problem after changing the brake pads and semi-rebuilding the caliper, and a new caliper from Toyota is a little bit pricey, and they do not make rebuilt ones, and you have to order a rebuilt one from another company. So I think I'm going to replace the caliper one way or another, whether it's remanufactured or a new one from Toyota. And then if the problem still exists, then it's going to have to be up in here. It's going to have to be the master cylinder. Where's the master cylinder? So it'll have to be the master cylinder or possibly the brake booster. And there's the vacuum hose for the brake booster and the check valve for the brake booster. That white ring is the check valve with the clamp on the hose. So it could be the brake booster and it could be the master cylinder. I don't think it's the proportional valve because the pressure doesn't even go through the proportional valve. So, but if I were to take a guess, I think it's probably the caliper, because the fact that it's the only one out of the 4 cylinder brakes that feeds directly off the master cylinder, that means it's probably being actuated a lot differently. So it could be that it just prematurely, or not prematurely, this car has some miles on it, but it could be that it just wore out quicker than the others. So I think replacing the caliper would probably be okay for the next step, and then if it still has the problem, I guess I'll figure out what it is.